back on as well? Sorry about that. You there, man?
Yes, I am here.
I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Morrow City Council, October 27th, to order. If you will still stand for the pledge of allegiance and one more shot. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
You've all had a chance to look at your agenda. We went over it earlier. I'm going to try to make sure that I don't miss anything. On the consent agenda, you got the approval of the October 13, 2020 regular minute meeting, October 13, 2020 work session minutes, approval of the October 13 executive session minutes. We have the recommendation from the city manager for the interim chief and the organizational restructuring. We have declaring a nuisance of a tree and the ability for the city to be able to go out and get that solved. We have Georgia Power lights, with the exception of Waterson Park, and to allow the city manager, or the mayor, myself, to execute any and all agreements with Georgia Power to be able to make that happen. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion, do I hear a second? Do I hear a second on the consent agenda?
Second.
Got a motion, properly seconded. All those in favor say aye. Ms. Tran?
Aye.
Ms. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Quoth? That's all. And this time. Motion passes unanimously. Got it. Meeting agenda, approval of the October 27th, 2020 meeting agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Got a motion, do I hear a second? Do I hear a second?
Cost.
Got it. All those in favor say aye. Mr. Quah? I'm watching this.
Aye.
Ms. Knight?
Aye.
Ms. Dean?
Aye.
Ms. Tran?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Tonight we have a presentation from Morrow and Ms. Melissa Mullinex, the Chief of Staff.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I am Melissa Mullinax. I'm the Chief of Staff at Morrow. And I'm joined tonight by several colleagues. Tracy Roberson in our planning department, say hello, will do this presentation with me jointly. But I'm also joined tonight by our Morrow's Chief Counsel, Liz O'Neill, who will be here, is here to answer any questions that come up afterwards about the IGA or any legal questions. And then Colleen Kiernan, our Government Affairs group, is here with us. I want to recognize Jerry Griffin, who is our board chair one of the board chairs from Clayton County. Mr. Griffin.
Hey, Jerry, it's been a long
And
time.
then, the irrepressible Michael Hightower, who comes everywhere with us, and Ozzy, whose last name I'm not going to butcher.
It's okay, Kashani.
Kashani. I think that's all of our, and Jennifer Haber, one of our consultants for Clayton County. So before I get into the presentation, I want to point out that you guys have packages, and there are things in the packages that we'll be referencing in the presentation. In the package is a copy of the IGA. We'll talk a little bit about what that does and what it doesn't do. There's a listing of all of the bus stops within the city of Morrow, a report on the amenities program that we started this year in Clayton County that shows means that we have converted from stops to shelters. And then on the left-hand side is the presentation that we're going to go through tonight. And then a chart that will come in handy at some point, although we won't really talk much about it tonight, but it's the FTA, sort of federal funding evaluation, is to help folks understand what we're all thinking about as we do the planning and kind of get ready for the high capacity projects wherever they are in the jurisdictions. So that's what you have there. And with that, okay, you brought that up. Let me see here. All right, the presentation says that we're going to be joined by Frank Rucker, who is our Chief of Capital Expansion, Planning, Innovation, all things construction. Frank is feeling under the weather and decided not to come tonight and risk getting any of you guys sick. So here's our agenda for tonight. We're going to talk about the contractual relationship that MARTA has with the county, also with the city of Morrow. We're going to talk about this, the Clayton Justice Center Transit Hub, which we recently opened, the bus shelters and the amenities, the multi-purpose maintenance facility, what we're doing with what we call our essential service plan, the bus reduction plan, Clayton system planning, which is where Tracy will take over, and Clayton land use planning, which directly relates to our TOD and economic development work that we're doing that you guys are doing. So, I suspect most of you know this, but let me spend a little bit of time going through it, which is that in November 2014, the referendum was called, and then it passed. And the relationship that MARTA has around the overall service in Clayton County is with the county commission. And as a result, we have quarterly briefings with the county commission. And we are beginning to, and we do regular public engagement around projects, but we recently started doing what we call road shows, and we did 2 in Clayton County just in September. And we certainly acknowledge that we need to do more direct communications with the cities, because our focus, because of the way the contract structure is with the county. That said, between the county and the public, we're going to add in this sort of regular communication with the cities. Which brings me here to this IGA. As I said, you have a copy of that in your packet. And what this does, and why it was signed, back when it was signed, was to allow MARTA to install the bus stops independent of your zoning ordinance. And I may not get that language exactly right, and Liz can certainly correct me if you guys can, but the point of the IGA is to lay out really the responsibilities around the bus shelters, stops, and amenities. It does not direct service, MARTA service within the city. Service within the entire county and the city is governed by the rapid transit contract. And then this slide is to share with you where we are on the escrow account. As you know, when the 14th Amendment was signed, which is the initial relationship between MARTA and Clayton County, an escrow account was set up and determined to be the way to save long-term for what we knew would be an expensive, high-capacity rail project. If you look at these numbers, you can see how they break out. At the very bottom line, the total there shows 121 million, I believe, 27. And that's different from the number at the top, which is 124.4 million. That 124 number is the number that's in the reserve account right now, and that just includes interest. The numbers down here are just sort of the direct as they came in from finance. So 124 million right now in the escrow account. All right, so MARTA 2040. This is what we are calling our state of good repair, our capital program that includes state of good repair and the expansion. State of good repair, of course, is all of the work that goes into maintaining, and in this case now, upgrading and rehabbing all of our stations, the tunnels, the tracks, all of that work. these are sort of the behind the scenes things that are frankly quite expensive, but aren't the flashy expansion projects. So let's spend some time going through what that looks like here. The Clayton Justice Center Transit Hub. This is a transfer station for 4 bus routes that carry about 800 riders a day. Before this center was opened, the buses pulled into the Clayton County Courthouse on the side road and were, there were no shelters for folks, and it was sort of a hazard for people coming out of the senior center and the aquatic center. Is our friend Keith part of it? Yes, he can tell you all about that. And so what we did here was create, basically repave the parking lot and create a new transfer area. All these buses pull in there. It's actually inside the parking lot there. There's improved waiting space. There's improved park and ride. We'll be installing a Breeze machine there so that folks in Clayton County can actually buy their Breeze cards there instead of having to get it at a rail station. And just as an aside, I'll share with you that I've been at MARTA for 2 years, and when I first came there, one of our board members, Roberta Abdul Salam, said to me, we've got to get a Breeze card machine at South Lake at that shelter there, the bus stop. And so we started looking at that, and there are frankly just security issues in the mall parking lot, but we haven't given up on it. We will have one at the transit center, and we will have one in North part of the county here as well in the future, but not too distant future. Think.
The video, not sure if it'll work or not.
Will the video work? Do you know how I get this to?
I don't think it's there yet. Say that again?
Yeah, if you want.
We're so excited to do our first project here in Clayton County at the Justice Center's Transit Hub. This facility serves about 800 customers a day, 3 bus routes.
Well, today is a great day in Clayton County simply because this transit hub is being opened. This bus stop has creativity to it. This stop is going to be somewhere where the citizens can come, wait on the bus, but enjoy their surroundings. So it's a good day in Clayton County.
I designed this piece with the help from Marta and Found to try to produce something for the community painting. You know, even in times like this, I wanted people to have a sense of moving together and also standing together, whatever comes.
Today is significant in that this is the first transit hub that MARTA has placed in the county. The citizens are engaged in this process. We are continually trying to push forward to meet the needs of the citizens in this community.
We have a lot more in store, and we're just so excited to serve so many customers with great amenities, keeping them out of the elements in the cold weather, the warm weather, and providing a safe environment. And we're just so excited to serve our customers here in Clayton County.
Great, thank you for doing that. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit more about our expanded shelters and amenities. And before we get into that, I'll share with you what goes into determining which stops get a shelter. And it's ridership, so that we have, where there are more than 25 or more boardings a day, a shelter is put in place. And you'll see in your folder where I listed the bus stops that are in Morrow and the ridership. We look at land use, what we call lifeline facilities, senior centers, hospitals, government offices. Local input, certainly. There's a list of an additional 30, the next 30 stops to be converted to shelters in 2021 that the Clayton County Commission has and we'll be looking at, and I'll talk with you some about 2 of the locations in Morrow that are on the initial list. And then local projects. So if there's GDOT work happening or if there's sidewalk work that the city is doing or the county's doing, and we can sort of leverage that, we consider that as well. Lastly, of course, there's a field evaluation, to make sure that there are not ADA issues or other things that need to happen that are not, that MARTA can't do, like, curb cuts and other things, sidewalks there, so that our investment makes sense and can actually be used. Let me get back
Is there
here.
another video?
Okay.
A very important aspect of a transit system is bus shelters. I'm happy to say that Clayton County is receiving more and more bus shelters every month. One of the most important things is to make sure that our citizens are protected from the elements. So I'm happy to say that MARTA is working hard to provide more and more shelters throughout Clayton County. So stay tuned, there's more to come.
All right, so on shelters in the city of Morrow. What you have here in your document are the bus stops. The ones in blue are the ones that are currently running in our, what we call the essential service plan. And the ones in red are the ones that are closed right now. I will say, just, I hit on this later, but I'll just go ahead and say that of the 9 bus routes in Clayton, 6 are running and 3 have been suspended right now. I know that the 194 is on folks' mind, and we're eager to get these restored as well, but given where we are with the pandemic, we are still socially distancing on our buses, and it makes it difficult to run all of them. But you can see here in this list that there are, most of the stops in Morrow are just bus stops and not shelters. In 2021, the proposed conversion, they're 30-year, and right now the Merchants Way at Exchange Place and Mount Zion at Marketplace are both on the list to be upgraded to shelters. But as I said, that's a conversation that we can continue to have maybe with your sort of planning staff, and city staff, in conjunction with the Clayton County Commissioners. Overall, what we're doing in our amenities program is 150 bus stops, bus shelter amenities over a 5-year period. There are 30 new bus stops that were installed in 2020, and there'll be 30 more in 2021. And I think what's important to note is, shelters generally are the better way to go, but 51% of Clayton County customers are served by a shelter, even though the number of shelters is relatively small here. There are 635 bus stops and 48 shelters. But what that 51% represents is that we have shelters, of course, where the ridership is the highest. We know that we could do better, and that people want to see more installed, and it's a conversation we want to continue to have with folks. I'm going to move on now to the multi-purpose operations and maintenance facility overview. This is something that was also negotiated and agreed to in the 14th Amendment, and that we affirmed in the 15th Amendment, that MARTA will be building this bus storage and maintenance facility in Clayton County. To date, we have evaluated 3 proposed sites, 2 Colony Road sites and 1 on US 41. There's a lot that goes into this kind of work, but what this will be is about 5 times bigger than we originally agreed to with Clayton County. So it will be a bus maintenance and storage. We will operate a paratransit, one of our mobility services out of there. It will be a police precinct. We will do, we'll have office space and training space. And then this is also, of course, being led by our real estate and TOD team. And so we'll be looking at TOD opportunities around this facility. We were awarded $13 million by, was it DOT or FTA to support this project. So it's, it's got the attention of federal funders. I think that's a positive thing. Oh, I didn't do it there. There you go. This is generally what it will look like. The benefits for us and for areas. Of course, we'll have increased system efficiency. We'll have lower operational costs. We're going to expand our paratransit service. This also is the location where we hope to locate our EV charging, and we have, we already have CNG vehicles, but hope to be adding EV charging facilities and electric buses. And then, of course, there's the investment in jobs in Clayton County. And we have committed with the Clayton County Commission that we will work with the County Workforce Development Agency to do local hiring and make that a priority for this facility. And talk a little bit about the pandemic and our routes. When we decided in April that we have buses overcrowded and that this was a real risk for our riders and our bus operators, the numbers that we were worried about then have gotten much worse. And of course, all the news reports are that, at least in Georgia, the numbers are getting better, but that's from a high in July and August. That's not from April. And so, although we all have COVID fatigue and are ready, and I know that folks need all these bus routes back, we are not convinced that it's safe to do that yet. We've done a lot of things to improve our protection of our operators, from PPE for them to plexiglass shields installed on all of the buses, to new air filters installed inside the buses. But we have essentially marked off about half of the bus so that it's enforced social distancing. And so what that means is that all of the buses cannot run, all the routes can't run, all of the buses are still running. This is not a cost reduction measure for us. This is really a public health response for us. So all the buses are running, but on a reduced number of routes. At this point, we have 50 routes running. We started, when we first reduced it, we cut down from over 100 to 40 routes. We've added back up to 50, and we are looking every week at where there's capacity to pull some buses off of the heaviest routes and add them back. And so I can't tell you when the 3 Clayton routes will be added back in. We're looking, we're looking at a possibility in January of maybe adding all the routes back in at midday service. I don't know that actually solves lots of folks' problems. You need to get to work in the morning and home in the evening. But we're looking at all the possibilities because we're aware of what a burden this is on folks. The other thing I'll say is that there's a list of all of the routes that are currently not running that are ranked, in a equity index way. So that factors in vulnerable populations that are served, proximity to senior centers and that kind of thing, the number of customer complaints that we've heard about the route. So it's all factored in. So there's a list that I'd be happy to share with you guys. So if you are getting calls from people about the bus routes, you can have that and you can say, this is the list and how they're going to be coming back. We have seen a 50% decrease in Clayton's daily ridership since the pandemic. We've all felt this in different ways, so I don't want to belabor that point. One last thing before I hand it over to Tracy that I'll share with you guys that we just announced about 2 hours ago is that recognizing that we have these bus services not running fully, we did an analysis of the polling locations in the entire jurisdiction. And there are more than 650 polling locations across Fulton, Clayton, and DeKalb counties. We have 99 polling locations that are not served by bus right now. And so we have a partnership with Uber that we're calling Morrow Connect. And we announced today that anybody who votes at any of those 99 locations can get a voucher from us for Uber for $16 for a round trip to get to the polls and back to vote that day. We'll be pushing that out. We'll be sharing that with all the elected officials so you guys can send it out to folks who need it, and hoping that we can do our part to make sure that folks exercise their right to vote and can get to the polling place on election day. So with that, I'm going to ask Tracy to come up. When she's finished, I'm available for questions from you guys from the audience. Liz is available, and we'll all see what we can do to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. This portion of the presentation, I will talk to you about the transit system plan. It is highly animated, so I'm gonna have someone to click through this for me. What I'd like to say starting out is that Melissa spoke about the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment quite a bit in her presentation. And what I am excited about is that this transit system plan that I'm about to share, what it does is take all of the elements promised in the 14th Amendment and 15th Amendment, and it brings it all together in a synergistic, integrated plan that complements 2 high-capacity corridors that the MARTA board approved in 2018. A locally preferred alternative high-capacity corridor on both the east side and the west side of the county. So what we have done essentially is redesign the bus network so that it can integrate for the future into these high-capacity corridors. So I am definitely very, very excited about the transit investments that we are making here in Clayton County. And the proposed transit investments have the potential to serve and benefit more than 260,000 residents and major employment centers of Clayton County, as well as other neighboring Fulton, DeKalb, Fayette, and Henry counties, because we do look at transit from a regional perspective. So let's take a look at what is a transit system plan. The transit system plan involves exploring various transit improvements and providing solutions to improve Clayton County's transportation mobility, accessibility, and connectivity to the Atlanta region, while providing greater access to jobs, providing congestion relief, greater access to job, congestion relief, environmental benefits, and bolstering economic development within the county. And these particular solutions is what we call our purpose and need. This purpose and need was actually identified by the citizens of Clayton County once we started the analysis for high capacity here in the county. So the transit system plan is designed to create a 30-year vision for transit improvements and address the future needs for the county. The plan creates a list of prioritized transportation projects, identifies short-range and mid to long-range improvements, offers a redesigned and improved bus network in the county. And like I said, it complements both the high-capacity corridors on both sides of the county. And it also introduces some additional new elements like the mobility hubs that Melissa spoke about earlier, parking ride lots, and premium service in the form of arterial rapid transit, we call that ART, bus rapid transit, we call that BRT, and commuter rail, we call that CRT. So let's take a look at some of these new elements. The first one we're talking about are the mobility hubs, which the mobility hubs are really like small transit stations. If you have experienced our heavy rail transit station and you have your ticket vending there, you have trash receptacles, you have a lot of different amenities at a full station that you don't necessarily have at a bus shelter. So that is what the hub is all about. We promised that we would have hubs in the 14th and 15th Amendment, and you will see in this presentation where those hubs will be designated. So the hubs feature ticket vending machines, bus shelters with passenger seatings, trash receptacles, and some of the hubs may also provide park and ride spaces. The next new element we'd like to talk about is arterial rapid transit. This is a type of enhanced transit service consisting of a network of fast and frequent transit routes on high-density, mixed-use corridors such as US 41 or Terra Boulevard. Some of the characteristics is that the buses arrive every 15 minutes or less. They operate at higher speeds than the local bus. They have transit signal priority, enhanced stops, and queue-jump lanes. And the queue-jump lanes allow the buses to enter into the traffic prior to the regular vehicles. All of these features improve bus travel time. The next new element is the Bus Rapid Transit, or BRT. BRT has features very similar to ART, and the BRT is a bus mode that's designed to offer many of the same benefits as rail transit, but it's constructed at a much lower cost. The BRT vehicles operate in a designated transit lane for buses only, and this allows for that rail-like speed because no other vehicles will be in the lanes. And as mentioned earlier, it's like rail, but a lot less expensive to build. Also, the BRT vehicles, as you can see on the screen, are very, very stylish. They even somewhat look like rail vehicles. And typically they have their own special branding as well. So you will, when BRT comes on board, you'll have a special bus and it'll be very, very distinguished, the BRT from the regular local bus. Again, like ART, BRT has 15 minutes or less frequency. The distances between the stations are much greater, which allows for faster travel. And BRT is very much rail-like and is often called rail on rubber tires. So the next slide, we'll take a look at what we're calling our pre-COVID program bus network. You will see 9 routes here that's represented to cover the Clayton area. You will see that Route 197 and 198 has an asterisk, and that is because those 2 routes were actually slated to begin in August of this year. But of course, due to COVID, they have not been implemented yet. But as soon as we are over the COVID period, they will be immediately implemented. So we have used these 9 routes as our baseline. And now we will take a look at what we are proposing. So if you look at phase 1 of the recommendation, we start out with 2 ART routes, which have been created to offer greater mobility for Clayton County. The first ART route will connect the College Park MARTA station to the South Lake Mall area via the city of Riverdale. And the next ART route will offer enhanced transit service from the East Point MARTA station to the Clayton Justice Center, mostly along the US 41 and Terra Boulevard. For phase 1, we will have 9 completely redesigned bus routes. The routes you saw earlier, we will keep those routes, but they will be redesigned to offer greater frequency than your current local bus service. It will have improved travel time, and it will certainly address the east-west connectivity so many citizens here were concerned about. So we're very excited about that. And this particular phase 1, will have 4 new transit facilities, including 3 new mobility hubs, 1 in Forest Park, South Lake Mall area, and 1 at the Clayton Justice Center, and a park and ride lot in Lovejoy. The South Lake Mall and the Clayton Justice Mobility Center will also have additional parking. So you will have the hub as well as a park and ride lot there. And then there will be a park and ride lot in Lovejoy, and that will be particularly beneficial for people who want to get on the system that's outside of the county line. That completes phase 1. Then we'll move into phase 2. In phase 2, the ART route that you saw earlier, the College Park to the South Lake Mall ART route, will be upgraded. It's going to be upgraded and converted over to BRT, Bus Rapid Transit. And we're going to do this by adding some transit-only lanes to portions of this route. and that will just allow for more reliability and increase travel speed for that area. During this phase, we will introduce an additional ART route from Riverdale to the Clayton Justice Center along State Route 138 and US 41. This phase will also have 2 new transit facilities, a mobility hub in Riverdale and a parking lot in the Stockbridge area, adjacent to I-75, and we're calling that one Clayton East. So that is the phase 2 portion. And now let's look at the entire phase 1 and phase 2 combined, so we can talk about the entirety of what you will have. So ultimately, it will be 1 BRT route, 2 ART routes, and then there will be an additional high-capacity corridor route on State Route 54. That particular corridor is still under analysis for commuter rail. And if you look at the map, you will see that denoted by the green line on that State Route 54. Now, that project is very robust. It takes a very long time. We have done a great deal of work, and that deserves an entire meeting of its own to discuss. But again, this network is integrated into that particular high-capacity corridor. Then you have the 9 restructured routes and 6 new transit facilities, including the mobility hubs and parking rides. And I would just also like to know for Morrow, you will see on the map that at least 6 out of the 9 routes will be servicing Morrow at the South Lake Mobility Hub, 194, 197, I believe 198, and what's the last one? I can't see. 193. 193. So you have at least 6 routes, and you have your packages there, and you see all of those routes integrate at the South Lake Mall Mobility Hub. So the last thing I'd like to share about the system plan is just a compare and contrast of what we have now in Clayton County as opposed to what's to come. All of the existing bus routes currently terminate at MARTA stations, and there are no designated transfer facilities now for intra-county travel. Currently, MARTA does not offer high-capacity premium transit here in the county. The frequencies for most of the local buses right now are up to 60 minutes, and generally MARTA only offers 1 route per corridor right now. And finally, if a transit passenger wants to travel within Clayton County, you have to transfer multiple times to reach your destination, which means the trips within the county can be very lengthy. So what we are proposing and the features of this redesigned bus network is that the bus routes will terminate at the mobility hubs as well as the MARTA rail station. This will allow the buses to be shorter with more frequent service. Also, we have 4 new mobility hubs designed for quick and efficient transfers. This system plan will introduce 3 high-capacity, high-frequency BRT and ART routes. The local bus frequencies will be significantly increased with the proposed recommendation. So that means basically if you were waiting 60 minutes for a bus to come, that could be cut down to 45, 30, and in some cases 15 minutes. And the new recommendations consolidate service along certain corridors at the mobility hubs. Finally, the proposed recommendations offer the ability to transfer to the MARTA rail service with a much higher frequency. And there are some similarities between existing and proposed, and that is that it's have a similar geographic reach as current, and the proposed redesigned bus network could be implemented with similar operating costs. And that concludes our transit system plan. I know it was a lot and it was quick, but all of this really means is a better, faster, more efficient Clayton bus network for the citizens here in the county. And so with that, I'd like to go ahead and talk a little bit about the land use and the TOD planning that we are also executing at MARTA. And before doing so, I like to just give credit where credit is due. We met with the leadership here and the stakeholders here in Clayton County in late 2018 to talk about the transit vision and to begin understanding what you all wanted in the transit system plan. But also during those workshops, we shared with the stakeholders and the leadership here the importance of TOD planning. We shared MARTA's TOD guidelines and talked about developing that for Clayton County. And at that time, all of the stakeholders there in the jurisdictions represented were all on board. But there was one individual that spoke up and said, while we're all on board, all jurisdictions along the corridors, we want to make sure we do this, not just do it, but do it right. So we want to make sure we have additional guidance. And that strong voice was Sylvia Reddick. So I give her credit all the time for being the voice behind MARTA moving this project forward. And so we took that back to executive management, and executive management said, let's move forward with it, and that's what we have done. The project kicked off actually this year, and the goal of the planning and TOD project is to basically work with Morrow and all of our partner jurisdictions along these two high-capacity corridors, basically to create transit-friendly model ordinances for TOD development in the county. And it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all, but it will be developed in a way that each community can tailor it to meet their own vision for development along these corridors. And like Melissa mentioned earlier, this is really important for the sake of acquiring federal funding. And so we're very excited to move this project forward because we do know as these projects come on board, we do need that federal money to make this possible. And having transit supportive model ordinances will help boost those ratings. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and take a look real quick at the schedule. Like I said, we kicked this project off this year, and a couple of things that we've done to date. We've had one-on-one meetings, 2 one-on-one meetings with Morrow and the other jurisdictions. We've conducted 3 workshops to date with all of our partner jurisdictions. We presented the parcel analysis and shared the best practices from our peer cities review. Some of the things that are ahead, we have workshops in November and January. And at the end of this project, we will be sharing 3D visuals, and you will have a comprehensive report with implementation strategies for TOD. And we'll conclude this in the spring of next year. And just to share a little bit about the analysis for Morrow, as we analyze some key criteria for TOD readiness, you can see this map, some of the parcels analyzed. I'd like to share that Morrow did score above average as it relates to TOD readiness in comparison to some of the other partners' jurisdictions. And if you look at the map, the dark red is the areas that represent, most TOD friendly, and that's Clayton State University and the South Lake Mall area, and those have been identified as potential future TOD development. Again, this is a work in progress. We're working with Morrow, we're working with all of the other jurisdictions along this corridor, a total of 10 jurisdictions, and we'll be finishing this up in the spring of 2021. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it back to you, Melissa.
Tracy, why don't you stay close? If there are questions
kind of our house. So, you know, as a guest, we've got to treat you appropriately. But if you weren't here, I'm not sure the welcome would be as generous as I think we're going to allow. The city's already taken action to reduce the exemption that was allowed to. I've already proposed that the city terminate the contract that we have with you and give you the 90 days. We've asked by State Representative Glenn to table that motion to allow time to be able to have additional discussion. I think the agreement that the city wrote in 2015 is a disgrace, not only to the city itself, but ultimately to what we have. But the city council ultimately gets to decide that. I appreciate the pictures, but that's not the reality. The reality is, I've got people standing out there in the mud club. This county has paid $120-some billion. We've got another 100-some billion in a bank, and we're treating our people exceptionally poorly. And that's reality. The contract that makes the most sense, we filed an open records request with the county. We have some data, and it does appear, you know, that from the original contract in terms of what was allowed and what we requested, that some of that was done. But now we've kind of veered off track, and we're headed into ART and BRTA, or BRT. That doesn't address rail. You know, the original section that was proposed, and let's be honest, not everybody thinks highly of Morrow. It took a lot to be able to convince people in this county to endorse this. So as part of that proposal, we were promised rail. Not as a theory, but as a proposal, that is what convinced people like myself to vote for it. Because I knew what that could do for transit-oriented developments. And it was part of the commuter rail system that had been laid out, which is why we got a parking deck out there, which is why Governor Barnes basically said you will have that train before you'll have your parking deck finished. Now, he lost an election, that changes the world, but we're paying for this service. It's not like we're begging for somebody else's money. It's ours. Right? And where is that? So when we look at some of the data that was provided, it certainly looked like we started in the right directions. But now we're proposing spending $300-some billion on ancillary things with some interesting wording as to the whys. But your presentation didn't even have rail in it. So
Yeah,
trust me when I say that the citizens of this county, especially the citizens of the city, we know this area better than you do. Like, for real. We've been here our whole life in some cases. So when we look at what is necessary to be able to move people back and forth and what it does to our communities, that's Forest Park, that's Morrow, Jonesboro, and I realized there was an extended link to basically Lovejoy. You know, the third smallest county in the state of Georgia. That's also very thin, and we talk about creating east-west connectors, and your ridership numbers barely support north-south. You know? So let's ask some easy questions to start with. I have some people standing out there in the middle of a mud puddle today. Tell me how that meets the ADA requirements.
Well, we should look at each of those, the stops, but I would say if there are mud puddles, that means you don't have sidewalks. And isn't that a city obligation?
Is it a city obligation? Yeah. In other words,
We pour a concrete pad for our shelters.
well, you don't have any shelters.
Well, we do have a couple shelters here,
Well,
and
you
there
got one side of the
more.
wall. Right. So you drop people on the side of a railroad track that doesn't have a sidewalk. Okay. Doesn't have a crosswalk. Doesn't even make logical sense. And we would even go so far as to say if we sit on that rail or walk across that rail, it's in violation of law. You can say you didn't have to follow the city's bus code, but you also say in your own proposal that you got permits from the city to be able to put up there. We don't have a permit for any one of your stops.
Well, and Liz, can you come up and join? So let me address your big picture comment first about rail and what you guys were promised. And rail is addressed in here, in this presentation, and it's slight, but you might remember, I've been at Morrow 2 years. Shortly after I joined, the board took a vote for a locally preferred alternative, was two things: commuter rail from East Point Station down to Lovejoy, and then secondly, BRT in different parts that Tracy addressed. And so what we've been doing since then is letting the rail money accumulate, because that's what it's gonna require, and doing the planning that's necessary to get this project advanced. And so, as I have said to the Clayton County delegation recently, and to the Chairman Turner and the commissioners, we have a lot more information about commuter rail, and we should have a discussion with all of the impacted cities along this route. But it's a lot of information, and it frankly needs to be done in person. And you guys are a rare exception who are doing in-person meetings. MARTA is not doing in-person meetings for the kind of group that we need right now. And so we're looking, likely at a January date for an in-depth discussion about commuter rail and what that means, where we are. And you hit on it earlier about your comments about ridership. So on the one hand, you want more service, and on the other hand, you recognize that ridership is low. And so those things go together, and there's no way for us to divorce them. And so that's why we included in here the chart about the FTA and the process that goes into this. The commuter rail project is an incredibly expensive, in the $1 billion of a project. You have $124 million in the escrow account. So these other projects that we're talking about aren't instead of rail or instead of a high capacity project. They're in addition to, and they're being paid for with other pots of money. So that's one thing. Liz, I think you should maybe address the contract and the permit, not permitted piece, if you would.
So as far as, and good evening, I'm Elizabeth O'Neill. As far as having permits for the different bus stops, I know you talked about the IGA that MARTA entered into with Morrow, as we did with a number of other cities here in Clayton. I think all the cities were listed in one of the slide presentations. So Morrow's was a little bit different in that you were a jurisdiction that had a zoning ordinance in place that had some fairly very descriptive kind of setting for what would constitute a bus stop, what would be acceptable. And when part of what engendered entering into the agreement that we have and you all relaxing that zoning requirement was when we looked at the areas that needed to have bus stops, it would have been virtually impossible to have met the zoning requirements that were in place at the time. And so that's why that was the genesis of this agreement. And so, we established our roles. I think that what the agreement acknowledges is that it's always been within the MARTA Board of Directors' purview to have, to establish the service, and then we worked out an agreement where the roles and responsibilities as far as maintaining the stops were established in this IGA.
Well, I wrote the original zoning code when I was city manager back here. That was before C-Tran. And the idea when we got into C-Tran was to make sure that exactly what is happening out today would not happen here. If some other jurisdiction was willing to allow that to happen, that's on them. But it should never have happened here. So why did we bypass that? Good question. But we certainly intend to fix that. Okay? We didn't expect you to fix it. We went so far as to say, because we don't think you will, we went through the process of working with the private sector to build the one at Walmart, to pay $20-some thousand to build the one over at Clayton State University, and both of those have been abandoned. The one that by contract is written in the rapid transit section for South Lake doesn't meet any of the requirements that is written in that section. And that's not the city's section, that's the county section that you agreed to. So there's several pieces in here that define what we should expect. And you're meeting almost none of them, right? Just rolling the buses around on a set of tires, I'll give you that. Okay. But as far as devaluing my community, I'll give you that too. Unacceptable. Right? So you're gonna say, that's not my problem when I drop someone off the side of the bus That's your problem because I'm supposed to have a sidewalk. That's my problem because I'm supposed to have a crosswalk. That's my problem because I might not be meeting an ADA responsibility. Well, obviously, the answer is the bus stop shouldn't be there in the first place. That's a fact. The rail's only been there 100 and some odd years. It's not a surprise.
Liz, if I could just real quick, I want to be clear, but I didn't say that it wasn't our problem and that we're not interested in working with you to fix it. But you want to indict MARTA for puddles that I would say are, if there is not a sidewalk there, that truly is a city obligation, we're happy to work with you and to go through this list in detail.
After 6 years, I think it's enough to be able to say it's not like an accident. In other words, it's okay with you. And it was obviously okay with some part of the city council at a prior time. It is absolutely not okay.
It's not okay with us, and that's why we're here today.
It's okay if you're still doing it. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's like saying.
Well, we certainly can't stop something on a dime, and
Well, that's part of
this is the first time we've been invited to this Morrow City Council.
discussion. Right? And it just simply says, the agreement we have is terrible. That needs to be redone. Right? The ideas that we had as to how to prevent this, there was reasons we did it. Right? And that's just dealing with the basic system as it goes. You take that a little bit further, and I've ridden your system. Right? If the /1 job generator in this county, and ultimately in part of the state, is the airport, the bus doesn't go to the airport. It goes somewhere else. So, as a county that takes a tremendous amount of heat for what we can't produce, we don't even go someplace that the vast majority of people would want to go. And you go, well, John, you're not going to be able to do much about that. Okay? But I think it's pretty common sense to say the two routes that you have, neither one of them goes there. I can't appreciate Riverdale's route, even though I'm not representing Riverdale. It's very efficient, it's very effective, takes you right to the airport. Totally agree. Right? Some of the things that you got with the ancillary services, totally agree. When you come down this way and you say an hour from Clayton County system just to get to College Park Station, obviously that's not very efficient nor very effective. So you can say your ridership is based on certain things. I will say one better. Is if you don't go where people want to go, you're not going to have a rider. If we continue to pay the 1 cent, which obviously we have no choice, then it doesn't matter to you whether it's efficient or not.
So that's just not the case.
Well, that's a good statement, but again, I'm basing it on that's what's happening. Right? So we can say it's not our fault they're standing in the mud. 6 years later, it's somebody's fault. We can say it's not going to matter if John can't get to work in a timely fashion. That's somebody's fault. We talked about transportation-oriented developments, and I will say this: same company goes to the other side of town, and you run a phenomenal service. No question. Right? This side of town, not so much. Right? Are we just not expecting better, or are you just not expected to deliver better? I don't like being treated like a second-class citizen, and I won't expect or accept treating this city like. Right. Now, that being said, I'm going to let the others take the floor as well. I will give you this caution. City attorneys in the audience as well. Right? We're going to have some conversations with the FDA. Yeah. We know where your funding comes from. I may not be able to do anything about your board, but I can have a lot of input as to dollars. I can have a lot of impact on dollars. Right? All we got to do is show them what you're doing. Blame us if you want to. That's fine. Yeah. But we'll stand before them and make that same argument.
As is your right, but I'll say this. This is the first time we've been invited to the Morrow City Council. And I came to take the lumps and for you to make your statements that matter to your constituents and you believe. You said opinions tonight, not facts, about what we care about and what we don't care about, and what I have said. And you've mischaracterized what I said about the post and the sidewalk. And that's all your right, okay? We live in a world now where politicians can say whatever they want. I'm here to tell you that this team, under a new general manager of 2 years, is willing to work with you, to sit down and look at the bus stops, to make the changes that need to be made. If you want to move stops, we're open to that conversation. We will do that in concert with the Clayton County Commission and with you guys, but we're ready to sit down at any point. And I'll keep standing here and taking whatever lumps others want to throw our way.
Ms. Dean, any questions?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Just to follow up, I've experienced in other cities, buses and rail service, and I too, not having sidewalks is unusual, I should say. So with that being said, where cities do not have sidewalks, what do we do as far as working with MARTA and the city to remedy that? What type of plan or partnership?
Well, we have a discussion with the county about particular routes that need sidewalks. And lots of these roads are also are state roads. And so I think we need to really just get in a room and have the GDOT engineer on the phone also, or in there with us, and take a look at what we can do. Tracy, am I right that the county is participating in they just got a grant, either an LCI study or it was the Georgia Tech grant, which is related to connecting the transit facilities and sidewalks. And so what we do is we pour a concrete pad. Now that will prevent puddles right there at the bus stop, certainly. But the responsibility for the sidewalks belongs to the city and or the county or the state. But we can map out, our planning folks can map out all of the routes and where there are sidewalks and where there are not as a starting point.
Ms. Knight?
Good evening. I appreciate you all coming and providing us an additional layer of information. My questions really will revolve around wanting to resolve an issue with the bus stops and working so that we have a better rider experience for citizens and stakeholders, especially along our commercial corridor, which is Mountain Iron Road, which connects to Southwick Mall. And additionally, understanding that Clayton State, for the city of Morrow, and as well as for the county and for the region, is a destination location that should be treated as such. So we do need more attention and collaboration paid to the parking deck that's already available. I've had conversations with the city manager and others, trying to understand why isn't it a park and ride destination or an additional layer with Greta. Layering that location as a transit hub as well, so that it is in line with the future of whatever rail service comes through the county. Clayton State on previous maps was a rail station in addition to Southwick Mall. But Morrow has been skipped in many conversations, I feel. Even with rolling out this first year of the bus shelter improvement plan, I understand there's a shelter at Southwick Mall, but we have a retail corridor that connects to that transit hub. So there are some opportunities for shelters that should have truly been in that first round for 2020 that should have been rolled out because of the importance of the retail commercial center in the city of Morrow. I think my concern is that I don't want to reduce the rider experience. The stops need to be evaluated, and the true partnership for what makes a better bus service to lay the foundation for what may be a rollout of ART, BRT, and rail. We're missing out on those synergy lines with the bus system as it exists now.
Yeah.
With regard to transit-oriented development. MARTA is a very large player, and the county needs the assistance of MARTA to make sure that we get what we have been promised, especially with the future of economic development, because public transportation is always an attractive piece to attract employers and development. We may not be the county that has development that requires tower cranes, but we are an industrial county, we have a lot of jobs, we have a lot of affordable housing that is here already, and, you know, that will come online because we are a much more affordable county as far as our housing stock. So, what is valued in other areas may not be the right model to be valued for Clayton County, but Clayton County deserves the best service.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be a little bit more intentional and mindful with the conversations that we have to make sure that we do have better bus stops. That's the first layer. You know, we've got the poles in the ground with the sign, we've got the poles in the ground with maybe a trash can, maybe a bench,
Right.
and very few shelters. But we truly need better. And I understand rail is a long proposition, it's a long game, I guess you could say, but in the interim, we can still do a lot better with what needs to be delivered for a high quality service. The idea of equity across the system, Clayton County isn't experiencing that right now. We're really not. And I'm not here to villainize or, you know, make MARTA out to be the bad guy in any way, but for the problems that we have that can be solved in the immediate term, let's go ahead and solve them.
Yeah, we absolutely can solve a lot of what troubles you guys about the bus stops. That's the good news. Tracy, can you talk a little bit about the, can you explain what happened with the Clayton State stop? Are you familiar with that? Because it was before my time. That we used, you mentioned that it had been abandoned, and I think it isn't part of the system right now, but that was at the request, I believe, of Clayton State, is that right?
I think that was at the, that was built under, GDOT's purview. And, if it was previously served by C-Tran and it's not served by, MARTA currently, it is along the corridor, where we are analyzing commuter rail, and we have looked at that lot as being the best location for a commuter rail stop. So it is part of our analysis, even though it's not currently being serviced. So it definitely is part of the evaluation process.
But how do we transform that for now? How do we transform that
Yes,
now?
and that's what we'll come back to you guys, and let's schedule something for next week, right, the end of next week or the week after, and get in and sort of look at each of these stops, see what we can do.
Additionally, you know, Mayor Lample has mentioned the Walmart.
Yeah, we've actually let the Walmart deal with that one as well. That was built by the private sector, and the additional paving that was poured to make sure it wouldn't come up. I did meet with the store manager last week, and he is, you know, absolutely on board with having it returned back to its original spot. That's what it was built for. Right now, we're basically just watching people steal his carts and drag them across the street and sell them.
Okay.
Right, so it's creating this unsightly stop, so to speak, and there's a full structure
Right.
within the parking lot at Walmart. So, you know, we have some things that can be worked out, and they can be the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, as we like to say around here, to go ahead and transform the rider experience, and demonstrate a true collaboration opportunity for better service for riders as things are brought online. Because again, I just, my concern is diminishing the rider experience within the city limits, within the county. We need to make sure that we're getting what we have, we're getting what was promised, and it's of the highest equitable service and look compared to other areas. Because again, what Clayton County as being just as important within a metro area as any other area.
Understood.
Mr. Kwok, any comments? I think you're on mute, Kwok.
No, sir, no comment.
Ms. Tran?
Yes, looking out for Morrow's residents' benefit on the public services for the bus. So we're looking forward to have the sidewalk for the bus stop, shelter, and also the convenience. The airport is now would have a huge impact for this community, and it will bring in a lot of convenience for the bus rider, the people who use the community the public service. So before the rail would be here, I would like to see the route that Morrow residents can hop in, can go to the airport with the reasonable time consuming.
I think she summarized the concern that
Yeah.
I think would
Yeah.
benefit an evaluation
Yes.
of routes that exist now, going to the airport, directly to the airport.
City Manager?
So, I would like to ask a question in the conversation earlier. Do I understand that the BRT could be referred to as light rail?
No.
Okay. So when we hear the language light rail, it would never be a bus alternative.
Right.
Even though it may have a rail-like experience by
Right.
some measures,
Right.
okay? And then just to, I mean, obviously I've talked to a lot of people through the years, but when we gathered together, especially about the TOD, I feel like other city managers would join me in saying, we never thought it wouldn't be around a rail station. And so then I would want to ask, would you ever have a TOD around a bus station? I mean, is there one? Not philosophically one?
Yeah, so the planners can maybe answer this differently than I would as a layperson. I would say, yes, TOD is generally around the rail station. When I mentioned earlier about it being around the maintenance facility, it's a part of property, and we want to do more there than just the maintenance facility. And so that's why I mentioned that. Jennifer can talk a little bit about around the bus and how that might look, but we're not suggesting that we're not doing a rail project here.
And just because you mentioned it specifically, like any conversations that we participated in, Morrow, with me representing, I would have never thought that the TOD wouldn't have been around the rail station.
Yeah, do you want to explain the
Sure.
concept, how that works?
Sure,
Even though
sure.
it's not really, yeah.
Sure. Sylvia, there are places, there are many places around the country that have TOD around BRT stations. Cleveland, I think, is maybe one of the more notable examples where they have a BRT line that's called the Health Line. It's called the Health Line because one end is Case Western Hospital, and they have quite a bit of TOD that's transformed their downtown area along that route. That has been built around their particular stations in their area. Georgia does not have an example of BRT. MARTA is actively studying several BRT corridors and is very close to implementation for one, but right now we don't have any examples simply because we don't have a BRT. But there are other places, Minneapolis, Dallas, Cleveland, those are your Seattle. Those are your more notable ones that have BRT.
But they're built around BRT, I think what we all understand that economic developers want is they want to know that that there's been an investment that they can leverage and build on. And so a standard bus stop is not the thing, but a BRT line, and in Cleveland, as she said, it connects Case Western Hospital and Cleveland Clinic, it's all the things that have built up around that line.
Well, also, I would like to point out, your neighbors to the north in North Fulton County, if you recall, the whole reason that there is the Clayton escrow is because at the time, the conversation was around extending the heavy rail north of 400, and was the whole genesis for why there is a Clayton County escrow, to make sure that Clayton County investment happens in Clayton County. But subsequently, North Fulton basically required that whatever happens on Georgia 400 is bus rapid transit and not heavy rail, because it's so much more bang for the buck. And those stops up Georgia 400 all have transit-oriented development planning around them.
I can appreciate that. Where do you live?
Where do I live?
Yeah.
Southeast Atlanta.
Oh, has anybody, I know Jerry knows this area pretty well. For those who don't know,
I
Jerry.
do own property in Forest Park, though.
Right. But, I mean, we sit on 1941, we sit on I-75, we sit on 54. Whether that's me and you in a car, or that's you in a bus, it's just a bigger bus, right? We know the area well. Not kidding, right? I'm telling you, you're not gonna get there any faster. You know, unless you just start cutting a swath through on something that's not, you know, the railroad track itself. You gotta figure out how to get there. We do that every day, right? So.
Absolutely, and BRT, the theory behind this is that we would have a dedicated lane for that, because you're right, it won't be rapid unless it's in its own lane. That's the project that, you know, that's the failure, the lesson we learned in the city of Atlanta with the Atlantic streetcar, that it sits in the same traffic everyone else does on that 3-mile loop, and so it doesn't work. The Summerhill BRT that we're doing in Atlanta, I can tell you we have had success with the city of Atlanta in dedicating a lane for that. We have not had success in having the state give us a dedicated lane for the section that they control, but we're still working through that. And so that's why BRT can work, or how it can work here. And it doesn't replace the rail project. We get that. And so you know, it's been a long time, but class of 90 Jonesboro graduate worked at the movie theater at South Lake and moved to Dwarf House. So I know your area too. And I've driven that drive from Battle Creek Parkway up 1941 to get to college and back. So
You may not have felt the warmest welcome. We do appreciate the conversation, but I am very serious. I have no problem. If I thought I could get the votes today, I'd terminate your contract today. Would not even blink. Right? More than disappointed. Right? Everybody has a good conversation. It's a public relations team. I get it. Any questions from the city attorney? She's got some really good ones that might be of interest to us.
No, the only thing that I was gonna ask is, I know that the question, and I apologize, I can't talk for this time, but the only question I had was, with regards to feasibility studies and ridership, how often is that assessed for the city of Morrow?
well, the feasibility, you mean on the commuter rail?
For the commuter rail?
Yeah. So they're regularly, but there's a system, and I'm gonna butcher this, that we use, that FTA requires. Is it the STOPS model?
Okay.
And so that analysis is what we want to go through and show the full route, what it would look like throughout the cities, understanding how we know for sure from the railroad, and all of the other pieces that come together. So we regularly look at that. And my guess is from the records request, you have a bunch of that data. But when we come sit down, we'll go through it and make it easier to understand.
And we don't have any of the EPA studies. We don't have, I mean, there's just a boatload of things that, yeah, so we got the generics, you know, but to really be able to keep up with the math, if you will, not only from the financial aspect of where's money being spent, how's the money being applied. I'm not saying correct or incorrect, I'm just saying the first thing you gotta do is get the data. And the second one is, you know, I'm not so worried about our contract, I'm worried about this one, is to say, what's being applied? What do we have a right to expect, and what is being delivered? And then you're watching the timelines change dramatically. You know, right in here, we're basically saying our timeline should have been 2022. And now we talk about some theoretical opportunity 30 years from now. 30 years from now, whatever you're out there buying today is going to be significantly more expensive. Right? And that's where you start to come into that $1 billion number. But your $1 billion number wasn't so true based on, I think a 15-year number. It was like 400 million. It's only if you drag it out longer that you make it happen.
No,
But when we talked about this years ago, it was like 200 million. That's not your fault, right? That's
there
local
are
jurisdiction's fault.
much smarter planning and construction folks that you can explain how this has evolved, and we will bring them. But I want to, you mentioned a couple times about canceling the contract, and I just want to make sure that we all understand what that means. And so that means, according to our reading of the IGA, that we don't have the ability to then put in bus stops. Doesn't mean that service is canceled in the city of Morrow.
I understand. I'm sure we can do more than that. But let's see what we can do to work together.
You want to speak to the record singer?
I know that we have supplied you all with this and this, and I know you've been talking, playing around this and yeah. And we're getting ready to do a huge email, so you'll be getting those. And I think we have given you the environmental studies that we have. I will go back to our planning folks yet again, but.
We haven't posted, I don't think so.
I don't think we have the documents yet.
Okay, so I'll make sure.
Okay.
But in all fairness, I feel like it was communicated to us, but we haven't gotten everything that
No,
we
it's
expected.
an ongoing, we
Right.
wanted to get you because it was so extensive, it's an ongoing.
We only had the first installment first, and then I know that Dwayne said he was gonna circle back with me, so.
There's a lot of stuff.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
If I might, just one last comment. I do want part of the takeaway of this evening to be resolving what is currently a resolvable issue with regard to bus stops. I don't want that message to be lost with a lot of other conversation. It's about the rider experience, it's about the service, it's about access within the city in the best possible situation to increase ridership and the rider experience. So I don't want that to be lost.
Yep, I will email Sylvia tomorrow to schedule that sit down with our planning folks and your right folks here.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you.
New business, approval to appoint Deputy Fire Chief Jeff Moss as the state mandatory laboratory director, approval to execute the clinical laboratory improvement amendments application and related documents for the required certificate of waiver. You've had a chance to have that reviewed earlier. Do I hear a motion to approve? Motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Ms. Dean?
Aye.
Ms. Tran?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Ms. Knight? Motion carries unanimously. Authorization and approval for Mayor Lample to execute application and related document with the Georgia Department of Public Health for COVID-19 vaccination program. You've had that before you. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been second. All those in favor say aye. Ms. Tran?
Aye.
Ms. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Quah?
Aye.
Ms. Knight?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Approval and authorization for Mayor Lample to execute lease agreement and related documents for the lease of 1837 Lake Harbor Road. It's the apartment unit only. We've had that before you. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's properly second. All those in favor say aye. Ms. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Quah? Quah?
Aye.
Ms. Knight?
Aye.
Ms. Tran?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Ordinances and resolutions. Second reading of an ordinance on microbrews. We've had that before. Second reading. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Motion properly seconded. All those in favor say aye. Mr. Quah?
Aye.
Ms. Dean?
Aye.
Ms. Knight?
Aye.
Ms. Tran?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Second reading of ordinance 2013, residential trash collection. We've had that before you. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Ms. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Quan?
Aye.
Ms. Tran?
Aye.
Ms. Tran?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. We have the first reading of an ordinance on a fee schedule, street light removal fee. For those that are part of the work session, you've heard that. That was the $60 fee that the city charges. That will be eliminated. And then as an addition to commercial contractors, that was a section of the sanitation ordinance that was just inadvertently missed for your review. Those are all available from the city clerk for your review at any time. Comments from city manager?
Yes, sir.
Comments from the public?
Yes. Mayor, Council. I noticed in the work agenda, you guys talking about an upgrade on Morrow Road. Well, we've had splash funds approved, mayor and council approved, the installation of sidewalks on Lake Harbor. And I thank Billy for coming over and explaining to me what's going on. I mean, Lake Harbor is trash. And it makes no sense why we can't get these damn sidewalks installed. They're tearing up the front of my subdivision. We're constantly spending money. And, you know, this thing, the splash fund was approved 6-7 years ago, and we still don't have the sidewalks yet. It almost seems as though you're focusing more of your attention on the north side, where 4 of the elected officials live, and you're neglecting the south side. So maybe we need to change the election process and go down to our state delegation and ask them to do districting in the city, so we'll get equal support and representation. It's senseless. Secondly, and I'm gonna sit down, because I want them sidewalks bad. I really want them sidewalks. It'll improve our community, it'll improve the safety of the community. We got people walking in the street, you know, and it's just sad. It should have been done. Secondly, I noticed on in the work session, we talked about the interim police chief. But he was not named, and his salary was not discussed. But Ray Charles is blind and dead, and we all know who he is. So, tell us who he is.
It's Bobby Mostow. In terms of the sidewalks, I was frustrated as you. But I heard today that one of the properties that's directly in front of your subdivision is still held in ownership by the original owners in a company that is now defunct and been able to put money on government property. Now we got a legal problem for about 150 feet.
Is that where the tree fell, the property where the tree fell in the street?
No, it's actually where the sign is for your subdivision, and in the retention pond.
Wait, I thought the retention pond was sold on the county steps.
Well, go ahead.
Now, there are certain areas over there that they were not conveyed by the developer, so they still are the private property of that. Now, there are certain areas that did go to tax sale because there was not a payment of that. That is now in the land bank, and so the developer that who has the right to redeem that property because it was a tax default, they are now defunct. And so there are some title issues with regards to 2 parcels along that Lake Harbin project.
At Children.
At Children. Okay. And so there has to be a defining or a legal clarification of those areas. In addition, there's also some utility easements such as sewer and water that have to be resolved because you can't pave over those sewage and water easements. So there are certain things that we would have to address before you could just arbitrarily just lay a full long line of sidewalk there.
So we just found this out?
Well, so in the process, we what was it? Let's say it was a month, 6 weeks ago, where once you get to a certain stage, you have to start embarking on the easement right issue. And then with, one of the delays was all the county tax records offices have been closed. So just like, and we know this from grant funding, like the project they're starting on Jester's Creek Phase 3, I won that grant money 10 years ago. And we're only now going to construction because it's just unfortunately with utilities and easements and ownerships And the fewer people involved, the quicker the project gets done. Whereas on Morrow Road, it's a bridge, there are no ownership issues. So it may likely get done quicker.
All I'm saying,
Yeah, Morrow.
City Manager, we've been dealing with this for 3 administrations. 3.
Oh, I hear you, I do.
3 administrations. And to start in this administration, it got handed off to this administration. And we haven't gotten this resolved yet. And it's not good for the community. It's
It is
not good for
frustrating.
safety. It's not even good for the public works workers that walk up and down the street having to pick up the trash that they're throwing out the car. It's not even good for emergency service personnel. We need to get it done at whatever cost. The money's there.
This isn't a cost issue, this is a legal issue.
It's a legal issue.
And I can't get around that, right? Now, there are answers, but you're not gonna like any of them. You know, and you've heard this probably, let's see, we started at 7:30, I think I heard it at about 6, just to give you an idea. So the information's not that old, right? But do we not pave 150 feet and just do the rest? No, I'm not saying that's the brightest idea in the world, but that's an option A. And you're like, gosh, that doesn't sound very good. The other one is to try to get better information, right? Do the best we can. And there's some options, but, you know.
And the good news is
We have to follow
if it
certain
went to
things.
a tax sale last December,
Right.
then, you know, they have to hold it for a year. Well, we're approaching that year, so that may resolve itself just because it started last December and we're coming up on December.
That's right. It
So
sure
that-
did.
Yeah, so hopefully, you know, because it was.
They wanted me to buy.
It would've been easier.
We could buy, it would have been easier.
I'm not purchasing the retention home.
Jeez.
I can totally understand that. I'm just saying, it's, and I think that's what, $300,000, give or take, the sidewalk project over there.
Oh, no, it's more than that.
Okay, but, I mean, it's not from the lack of trying. We are trying, right? She won't let me. That's the bottom line, that's the law, whether I like it or not, right? But that is applying resources to every jurisdiction of town. It's not one side's better than the other. But we're trying, right? I don't like the answer any more than you. And I can assure you, they've already heard my polite version.
That's what I told them before the meeting. I don't want you to hear this for the first time during the meeting.
It is what it is. And I think she started off with, you're really not gonna like this. But anyway, other comments from the public? Okay. Comments from the city council? Steve? Ms. Knight? Mr. Quah?
No, he doesn't have one.
Ms. Tran?
She doesn't either.
No comment.
Good enough. My comment is a couple things. One is congratulations to Bobby Mostoller. He's going to be the interim chief for the city. He's got a heck of a resume. We're going to do a little bit of restructuring, you know, based on the interviews that we had as to things that the city can implement to provide you better services, utilizing, you know, a collective 75 years of experience between the top 3 players over there. It's not that we're not going out to do a national search. We should do a national search. We should get you the best and the brightest. If our guys can compete, that's great. But if somebody shows up, we should look at them as well. But in the meantime, let's use that 75 years of experience here and let's clean it up just a notch, right? There's some easy things that they identified themselves. We certainly want to be able to do that. So congratulations to Bobby. And the rest of the folks that did interview. There's some folks that interviewed, and maybe sometimes it's not your best day, but they had a good resume. They offered insight as to what we have as a bench to be able to say, you know, City Morrow does have a bench. Some of these guys are going to need a little time, right? But it is nice to know that, you know, in the future, you know, we've got somebody that we can pull if we need to be able to do that. Last thing, Safe Halloween is on October 31.
5 to 8.
5 to 8, please show up here. We'll have some good time for that. And if you haven't seen the program running, or I want to call it the Facebook ads anyway, Day of the Dead, more of a cultural celebration, I think you can be very, very pleased with that.
12 to 4.
12 to 4 on Sunday. And you know, we'll be able to move from there. So That being said, we'll go right into the work session. Consider meetings adjourned.